Welcome to my X-Men origin story, take 2. I realised after recording the first one that it went to 50 minutes. I was rambling for a long time without realising it, and that might be a bit long for you. So if you would rather have a condensed version, I'm going to do this one in 20 minutes against the clock. If you would like more detail, this is obviously a summary of 40 years of life, basically. If you would like more flavour, more meat on the bones, have a look at the longer version. This one will give you the nuts and bolts of my story. And as I said in the longer version, the whole point of this is if you're anything like me, whenever anyone does anything online or writes a book or anything like that, you want to know what their story is. You want to know why they think they've got something that you should listen to. What makes what they've got to say anything interesting or valuable. So that's the point of this. I want to share my story, let you know where this has come from. I think it's really important at the start to say, lots of the times when I see people writing books and sharing things about how to improve your life, how to improve your business, career, whatever it is, online especially, they have often come from a really traumatic background. They've been abused as children, they've been from alcoholic parents or a drug addiction background. And while those stories are really uplifting and motivational and incredible and fair play to anybody who's been through that, I often think when I see those stories, that doesn't really apply to me though, because I think most other people, many other people, maybe you, had a really nice childhood. I had a good life. I came from a good family. I had a mum and dad, and I lived in a nice house in the suburbs of Liverpool, and I had a big sister and a wider family, and there was lots of love, and we got everything we needed. And I think importantly, decades later, I still realised that I had lots of psychological and emotional problems that were leading to problems in my life and challenges that we all face. And that's partly why I think it's worth me sharing my story and worth me sharing what I've learned, because I think a lot of us can think that you only have problems in life if you've had big traumas. You came from an abusive background, alcoholism, drugs, abuse, as I've said, and that's just not true. All of us have had childhood experiences and things through our lives that have led to issues later in life, and we can learn from those things, and that's the point of this. So let's crack on. I'll keep it as brief as I possibly can, I promise. So my story, as I say, started with a lovely family. There's lots to go into it, but the nuts and bolts of what's important for the purpose of this. I had some health issues when I was a kid, some growing pains and whooping cough, and then I got to I was about 3 or 4 years old. I'm sitting in the back of my dad's car. As a little boy, I loved playing with cars. I had loads of little sort of matchbox cars in this big white book. I must have had hundreds of them. I used to have one of those mats. You might remember these depending on your age. One of those mats that's got like a city drawn on it, and you would drive around the city. Really basic stuff, much better than iPhones. I used to love them. And one day I'm driving in the back of my dad's car, and I used to sit behind him, and this was long before handheld video devices and things like that. So my thing in the car was I used to have, you might remember this as well, I used to have this little steering wheel and dashboard plastic thing that stuck onto the window in the seat behind my dad's seat, and I used to drive along as though I was driving the car with my dad driving in the front. And one day we stop at some traffic lights, and alongside us pulls up a black Porsche sports car. And I say to my dad, I'll see out the window and say to my dad, whose is that car, Dad? And he says, it's our solicitors, it's our lawyers. And I said, wow, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a solicitor then. And that was it. That was the start of my career, my business life. From that moment, every family party, every interaction with grown-ups, it felt like I would be wheeled out, and people would say, tell everyone what you want to be, Paul. And I'd say, I want to be a solicitor. And all these grown-ups would be really proud and tap me on the head and be really happy. And I went through life in the early years, that was my story. I just wanted to be a solicitor, and I was one of those kids in school who other kids were jealous of, because they didn't know what they wanted to be, and I did. I was really certain. People used to say to me, I wish I was like you. I wish I knew that. I wish I knew what I wanted to be. And that went all the way through school. I was really good in school. I was well behaved and did well and did everything I was meant to do and got good results in exams. And it got to about age 17, and I started developing a stiff neck. I remember one day saying, I complained about it to my parents, and they said, oh, we'll take you to the doctors. My dad took me to the local GP, the doctors, and the GP said to me, it was building up to exams around that age, and he said, it's because you're revising too much for your exams, you're huddled over your desk and your neck's getting stiff because of it. And I remember sitting there thinking, it's bullshit that I haven't done any revision. I used to have all my stuff spread out in my mum and dad's front room on their table, and I'd just be messing around, and they'd be out at work, and then my mum would come in, and the first thing I'd do is pretend to work, and she'd come in and the first thing she'd say to me is, oh, you've been working too hard, take a break, I'm going to make you something to eat, go and watch some TV. And I'd be like, oh, thanks, Mum. So I remember sitting in this doctor's room thinking, doctor's surgery, thinking, well, I can't say I'm not doing any revision, doc, like it can't be that. So I just got on with it. I was just like, okay, let's just leave it. So that continued, and that went through, and then I carried on going through school, and I got my exams, and I got the results I needed to go to university to do a law degree. Started my law degree, still on this path to become a lawyer, going through, and in the middle year in the degree, I was 19 years old, and big firms started sending in representatives to tell us how you go from doing your degree to getting jobs in the big law firms. And I remember this young lad came in, we were 19, he must have been mid to late 20s, and proper cocky young buck of a lawyer. And he says to us, when you come for an interview, you're going to be asked lots of questions, but the key question I'm going to ask is, why do you want to be a solicitor? And I'm sitting there thinking, got this nailed, know exactly why I want to be one. And he says, there's one answer we won't allow you to give. And then he pauses, which felt like for what seemed an eternity. He said, we won't let you say you've always wanted to be one, because that's a cop-out. We need to know why. I remember thinking, with a bat. I remember thinking, wow, that is my answer though. That is why I want to be one. And that night, went home, and that was the first time I'd unpicked this story. And I was like, shit, I want to be a lawyer because I saw a black sports car once. If my dad that day had just said to me, you can do anything, mate, to get a nice car one day. You don't need to do what he does. I'd probably never would have been a lawyer. Probably wouldn't have even known what one was for a long time. And I was just spinning. My whole head was spinning. I ended up having this chat with one of my favourite uncles in a local pub one night, and saying to him, I think I'm going to quit. And he sat me down, he's chatting, he said, well, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do if you're not going to be a lawyer? And I said, I'd be a footballer. I'm a big Liverpool fan, of course. That's, Joe, every kid from where I'm from grows up wanting to be a footballer. And he said, what's the chances of that? And I was a decent footballer. I used to play for the school teams and all that sort of stuff. And I just said to him, there's no chance, slim to none, but basically no chance of me being a footballer. And he said, exactly. So what you're best doing, he said, nobody enjoys their job. Nobody. So what you're best doing is doing a job where you make loads of money, because at least then you've got loads of money and you're rich. I remember thinking at 19, God, yeah, that's true. I don't know anyone who enjoys their job. So that sounds about right to me. So I just cracked on and I carried on with my degree, and I got it. I got the qualification I needed. I got the mark I needed. A year and a half later, then I went to law school and I qualified, and I ended up working for some of the biggest and most prestigious law firms in the world, in London first, and then in Liverpool and Manchester. And within a couple of years, and definitely within a year of qualifying, you do 2 years as a trainee, and then you qualify. I was just disillusioned with it all already, and I was like, this isn't for me. And even at that age, I was like, right, I'm gonna go off and set up my own law firm. And when I look back through my life, I realised that even as a kid, I was quite entrepreneurial. It wasn't the done thing back then. There was nothing on TV, no TV shows about entrepreneurs, nothing really to encourage you to go down that path. But I'd always been entrepreneurial. I used to draw pictures in class and kids would buy them, or I'd knock on neighbours' doors and wash their cars. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to set up my own law firm. At 28 years old, I started building my own law firm, and I launched at 29. And I was basically the most junior you could be. I was 3 years qualified. I became 3 years qualified at the end of August and opened my law firm in September 2009. And it was great, to begin with. It was incredible. It was dead exciting, and I loved it and the buzz of it. And I started with just a blank piece of paper and a pen and the internet and a phone, and I just started phoning potential clients and meeting them and building up. And I look back sometimes and think, God, I was so young. I can't believe anyone gave me any work. But it was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. It was such a thrill. And I built it from there, and it built and built, and I took on employees and got offices, and I took on some incredible clients to the extent that there were big law firms in the same city who their partners couldn't believe that I had these clients and they didn't. And it was great for the first year or two. And then over time, it just became more and more draining and difficult and tough. And at the same time, I was in a relationship, and that was developing, and I had a house, and I was doing property developments in my spare time. As I always say, it's got to be in inverted commas, because I didn't really have any spare time. I was working long hours most days of the week, getting up in the middle of the night to do stuff, and couldn't really sleep back then. And it got to a point in about 2012 it was, which was when I got married, and the end of that year, and by then I was struggling. It was getting tough, and I remember it was Christmas 2012, and I was lying. We'd had Christmas I'd got married in the summer, which is like a big footballers type wedding in Spain, there was loads of pressure around that, and I was doing property developments to pay for it and still running the law firm. And then we got to Christmas, and we're in my mum and dad's. We had a lovely day with the family, and everyone goes to bed and everyone's fast asleep. And by this point, I was really suffering from insomnia. I didn't sleep much at all, and I'm lying in the bed that I'd grown up in, basically my bedroom in my mum and dad's house, and my new wife's asleep next to me, and I'm just wide awake. Everyone else is fast asleep, and I'm just lying there thinking, God, I'm fucking unhappy here. Like, I'm not. I should be happier, because to the outside world, it looked like I had everything. I had my own business. I had a flash city centre office. I had a lovely city centre apartment. I had a great car. I had a beautiful wife. I had a loving family. I was in the local press, and I had these clients, and people would see me out and about networking and things, and I was held up by parents and parents' friends as like, this is the model, this is what society thinks you should do. I've ticked all the boxes, and I'm lying there thinking, but I'm fucking unhappy. Like, I don't like going to my own office. I don't like the work I do. Even in my personal life, I was struggling. And that night, I was just flicking through my phone, as we tend to do when we can't sleep, when we shouldn't. And I was just flicking through books, and I found a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by a guy called Tim Ferriss. And I'd heard of him because a mate had given me a book called The 4-Hour Body months before. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. I started having a read of it. And the book's all about how the traditional way of living our lives with work is not something we have to do. We can, there are different ways of looking at it and different ways of structuring your life. And I was thinking, God, this really resonates with me. I've always challenged the status quo, always challenged the way people do things. That's why I set up my own firm. I was challenging the way big law firms were run, because I just didn't think they were run very well. And I started reading this book in bed and thought, God, this is great. So then I ordered it and took it on honeymoon with me a couple of weeks later. And people always say to me at this point, I can't believe you took a business book on honeymoon with you. That's crazy. You're reading a business book on honeymoon. And I always say the same thing. I didn't read it out loud. Like, I'm a grown man. I was reading it in my head. My wife didn't care whether I'm reading Harry Potter or anything else. But I'm sitting on the beach next to her in this flash hotel in Dubai. And this book just caught me at the right time. And I love there's an old saying that when the student's ready, the teacher appears. And from that day, that is absolutely true, because I read this book and I just loved it. And as I'm reading it, I'm making notes, and I'm thinking all the ways I can change my business, but then also thinking, but I've only got a law firm because I'm a lawyer who wanted his own company. What if I started from scratch? What if I was doing this from scratch? What would it be? And I basically reverse engineered another business. Put together all the constituent parts of what I'd like a business to be and do, and what I would like to do, and ended up going from this corporate law firm that I'd been running for years to designing and building an online gambling company, which is the complete other end of the spectrum. People always laugh. People used to laugh at the time when I was telling them about it. And I came home and I started restructuring my law firm, but also started building this online gaming company. So at this point, I'm still running my law firm, I'm still doing property development, I'm still running houses that we've got tenants in, and I'm building this other company which started off with some seed investment, and quickly we tested it, built a website, and it was good, people liked it. And then I got like a big private equity investment from different individual investors, and that started to scale and that started to grow, and it looked like actually this was going to take off. And again, to the outside world, it looked like I'm doing all this stuff, but it's great and it's exciting, and part of it was, don't get me wrong, but I was just destroyed. And I'm working at least 100 hours a week. I'm working every day. I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating properly, I'm not looking after myself. I was suffering in my personal life. By then, the neck issue that I talked about when I was 17, that had developed and been diagnosed as something called Ankylosing Spondylitis, which is a chronic illness which is inflammation based, which basically causes inflammation of your joints, but also causes the joints in your spine to fuse together. And then I'd also been diagnosed as the years had gone on with something called Crohn's disease, which is a bowel condition. So I was dealing with both of these and having serious medication in hospital to deal with them at the same time of doing all this other stuff. And I look back now at that period and think, and I think this is something that gets overlooked actually, that when a lot of the time when people are depressed, you can't see it when you're in it because it's just your life. You just think this is just what life is. You think everyone else's life is the same. But I look back then how dark it was and how depressed I was at the time and how much I was struggling. And there were loads of issues. There was in that spell, and it all becomes blurry because of the way our minds work, and lots of it's probably been shut down. But there was a spell there where I was suicidal for a couple of years, on and off, and I'd pull myself in and out. And but I also had experienced for a few years before that, and through this whole spell, anger issues. So I would not generally. I think most people who had ever met me would say I'm fairly relaxed most of the time, but things would build up because I'd be swallowing so much stuff, and I'd be biting my lip all the time to try and keep the peace and try and manage things and try and manage clients and employees and my home life and all these businesses and contractors. And every now and then it would just feel like things had just built up and up and up and up, and then something had happened and I would just explode, like rage, like a volcano from the tips of my toes through to my head in like a split second. And it was it used to frighten me, let alone the people around me who would see it. And this was all going through. And again, I mean, this is a massively quick skip through it all, but it got to a point where I was just broken. I was just completely broken and worn out. And I remember thinking, God, this has got to change. I can't carry on like this. And around this time, I'd already started thinking, right, I can't do all of these things at once. So it started, well, the first step is, I remember lying in bed one night thinking, I don't know how I've got to this point. Like, I feel like I've built a prison around me. Like, this is all my own creation. I've done this. Like, I left a job that was secure and stable, but I wanted to go and have my own life and be free. And instead, I feel like I've built a prison around me and I'm trapped in it now. I don't know whether you ever feel like that or you've ever felt like that. And I was lying there wide awake again one night thinking about it, and I just had this epiphany. And I thought to myself, but it's my prison and I built it. So if I built it, I've got the plans for it, which means I know how to take it down because I've got the blueprints. So I could take it down and build something else in its place. And from that day, I was like, okay, the next day I woke up and started taking steps. So I ended up selling the law firm. I started selling off properties. It got to a point where the gambling company crashed. It looked like it was going to make, again, this is a story in itself, but it looked like it was going to be a multi-million-pound company at one point, and within months it just crashed and gone out of business. And from there, there's all, I mean, as you can probably imagine, there's all kinds of stories around all of these, but for the sake of speed, I ended up separating from my wife, I ended up getting divorced, and it got to a point where I thought I'd got the anger thing under control. My health had started to try and work on a bit because the stress was reducing. And it got to a point where a few different things happened, and I had another rage explosion and an anger explosion, and I just thought, you know what? There's always been something not that I'm not fully happy with inside. No matter what I do, no matter how much I achieve, no matter how hard I work, how much money I make, how many things I buy, there's just something missing, and I want to figure out what it is. And I made the best decision I've ever made, to be honest, and I decided to go and see a therapist. Within months, I was making these massive breakthroughs, and again, massive stories behind these, which I'll go into in the future if you want to hear them. And I had this more epiphanies, actually. I'd been sitting with him talking about stuff, and within the first couple of sessions, he said to me, Paul, this is like someone coming into me. He said, like Spock coming into me with a presentation and presenting his life to me and asking me to give him some answers. And I was like, yeah. And he said, that's not how it works. He said, you're talking about big things like leaving your wife and selling a company and another company closing down and all these massive things. And he said, and you talk about them like you're going to the corner shop for a pint of milk. And I was like, yeah, well, that's my life. And he said early on, second session, I think he said, how do you feel when you talk about this stuff? How do you feel? And I gave him an answer, and he went, that's not how you feel. He said, that's how you think. That's what you think about it. Tell me how you feel about it. And I remember saying to him, I don't know what you mean. Like, I can't even answer that. Everything was up in my head. And what I learned really quickly was I'd spent so many years suppressing emotions to deal with the stresses of life, suppressing everything, pushing it down, locking it down, that it was almost gone. Like, everything was almost gone because it was all in my mind, all intellectualized. And the massive breakthrough I had through going through family history and loads of other things, which was a revelation I never expected to get to, because I was always a really confident, self-assured, certain. I even had other mates would say to me, God, I don't know anyone who's self-assured as you. And it got to a point where I had this breakthrough, and I was walking my dog in the park, and literally stopped me in my tracks. And one day I was just like, shit. Like, I've got deep insecurity issues, deep fear issues, low self-esteem issues, and loads of this stuff I've been doing has been to prove myself to me, to the outside world. All of these different addictions that I realized I'd had, which were addictions to drink and to stress and to staying out late at night and to working long hours, and all of these things around my life were all caused by this need, this ego that had developed, this character that had developed to protect the insecurities and the fears and the self-esteem. And it was mad. It was like almost overnight these changes came in my life. I stopped drinking. I stopped being, one of my mates always said to me, God, you said you were always just extreme in everything you did. And it just felt like all of that extremeness, if that's the word, just reduced, just all of a sudden just fell away. All this weight just dropped off my shoulders. And it was all about, from that point, working on figuring out the root causes of all my problems, going through it all step by step, working with a therapist every week, working with coaches. I'd already started from a business perspective, because I'd look back at going through the stages of reflecting on business and what I like doing and what I wanted to do. I realized that my business experience was ridiculous for my age, because I'd done so many different things. I'd worked in a big corporate law firm environment. I'd built a business to business company, a corporate company, and built and sold that. And I'd also built a business to consumer company online and learnt all the stuff around that with social media and viral marketing and everything else, and done a property development business, which was a physical business where you're building physical assets, dealing with tenants. And I'd started learning all this stuff as well. I'd always loved the personal development world and learning about psychology and things. So I'd already started working with business owners and individuals to help them going through similar things to me, and helping them sort of restructure things to make their businesses and their jobs more like they would like them to be. And this was all step by step and still figuring it out. And that's what's led me to where I am now. That's what's led me to doing this video, to launching this site, and everything around it. Is that the experiences I've got, the story I've been through, the journey I've been on, I think it's fairly unusual for someone. I'm 39 years old now, so for someone to have been through each of those things, I've met lots of people in each category. You know, add on top of that, I've also experienced chronic health issues, so marriage and divorce, chronic health, the corporate world, my own corporate business, my own online business. I've met very few people in my life who've experienced all of those things. And something I've realised as I've gone through this is the thing I've always been interested in, at the core of all of this, even when I was a lawyer, was solving people's problems, figuring shit out, and solving root causes of problems, which is what I like to do. I hate treating symptoms. I think we live in a society where we treat symptoms all the time. And that's what's brought me here. So where I've got to now in my life is I've realised I really like to help other people. I think that what I've been through, the things I've learned, can help other people, can maybe help you. Because ultimately where it's got me to is a place, an older mate of mine, and my mate asked me a few weeks ago, I could tell he was worried about me, we were having a drink, and he said, "Are you happy?" And I said to him, "Do you know what I've realised that's not the right question." Because even in my darkest times, even when I was suicidal, when I was depressed, there were times when I was really happy. There were times when I was thrilled and exhilarated and buzzing. But what I never was content. I never had inner peace. And that's what I've found now. Through going through this journey, that's what I've found. I found how to have inner peace and to be content with your life while still doing all this other stuff and still doing the things you want to do in the outside world. But the things I've learned are so crucial, and I think most of us overlook. And I think as well, loads of the ways in which the stuff I've read and the stuff I've learned over the years and the work I've done with therapists and coaches and studying stuff is, loads of it's not that interesting for most people, the way it's presented. I'll be reading some books and think, God, this is interesting stuff, and I think we should teach it to people in school. But most people aren't going to read this book. It's just boring. And I just think if I do have a sort of an X-Men type superpower, I always say, in the book I wrote last year, I always say, there's definitely some deep down bitterness that I don't have a proper superpower. But if I do have anything, it's that I've always been able to take complex information, summarise it and disseminate it in a way that people can understand. I used to be good at that as a lawyer, and still am as a lawyer when I do legal work. And that's the whole point of this. I'm going to take the stuff I've learned, I'm going to take the stuff I've picked up through therapy and through coaching and all of the stuff I've studied over the years. And I am not a qualified psychologist. I do not have any qualifications formally in any of these areas, but something I often think now is, I have got all of those qualifications as a lawyer, but I know way more about this field. I know way more about this part of life because I love it. I'm interested in it. I read about it all the time. Can't remember the last time I read a law book because it bores me. I just don't have any formal qualifications in it. And that's a good thing, because actually one of the most important things I've realised is there's never, in this area, you can never know it all. There's always new stuff to learn. I do not have all the answers. I definitely don't have all the answers. I am still working on things on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. I'm still finding breakthroughs and learning new things all the time. But the point is, the stuff I've already learned, I think, can help you. And if it can't help you, it might help someone you know, might help your kids to overcome things that you just don't, maybe not even know are affecting your life until you start delving into them. So I think there's something valuable there that I can share. And also, by doing it through a website and a YouTube channel and a podcast and blogs, I can keep updating it. So as I learn new things, I'll share them with you. And that means that it doesn't matter that I'm not at the end of a journey, because I'm just sharing where I am on the journey, and I'll keep sharing it as I go along. And that's it. I wanted to keep it as brief as I can. If that is something that sounds like it might interest you, if any of the story resonates with you, if any of it connects with you in any way, then you can sign up for weekly updates by email on my website, paul7cope.com. You can follow me on most social media channels at paul7cope. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel and you will get all the videos as they come out. I'm just going to be sharing as much as I can, as often as I can. I'll be speaking to other people, getting people to talk about all of this stuff, psychology and emotion and human behaviour. And hopefully it'll be a little bit entertaining on the way as well. Keep it a bit lighthearted if we can. As I say, if you like this sort of stuff, if you are interested, subscribe, follow, and we'll see where we go to. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments on YouTube, contact me on social media, use the contact page on the website. And if you've got things specifically you want to ask me, we can maybe incorporate them into future episodes and future videos and podcasts. Hope that was informative. I hope it's helped. See you soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.